Tonight, President Trump on the road, traveling to Pennsylvania to rally support for his handling of the economy.
I inherited a total mess. Prices were at an all-time high when I came in. Prices are coming down substantially.
The messaging war to win over voters on affordability. Plus, the Supreme Court case weighing whether crisis pregnancy centers should turn over their donor lists. Their accusations that they tricked pregnant women to choose them over Planned Parenthood centers. And Romania's war on Christianity. Truth or fiction?
This is the kind of attacks you come under, and sometimes it comes from religious people.
CBN News takes you on the ground to see what's happening firsthand. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
The economy takes center stage as the president hammers home a message of affordability for American families. Welcome to Faith Nation from our Washington Bureau. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening, I'm Jenna Browder. Well, President Trump and his administration are addressing the issue tonight in Pennsylvania. His trip comes as new polling shows record low approval of his handling of the economy. One group already getting some help is America's farmers.
This relief will provide much-needed certainty to farmers as they get this year's harvest to market and look ahead to next year's crops, and it'll help them continue their efforts to lower food prices for American families.
President Trump announcing a $12 billion aid package for America's farmers, thanks to money coming from tariff revenue.
But by the end of this month, so just in the next couple of weeks, every farmer that is able to apply for it will know exactly what that number looks like.
The administration says this will help farmers struggling to sell their crops, as many feel negative effects from the administration's tariff policy. The announcement coming right before Trump's talk about affordability. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro with sharp criticism ahead of the president's visit.
I hear it from our manufacturers. I hear it from our farmers who are doing everything right and who are getting screwed because of Donald Trump's economic policies.
And new polling backs that up with a Harvard Capps Harris poll showing 57% of voters believe Trump is losing the battle on inflation. That same survey pointing out the economy remains the #1 issue for voters. This pushback comes as millions of Americans worry about the cost of health care. Insurance premiums are expected to skyrocket next month as Obamacare subsidies expire. The Senate will vote this week on an extension for the subsidies, but without Republican reforms, it's not expected to pass.
Democrats' great scheme to fix health care, Obamacare, has failed.
Republicans have no plan. They are so divided between themselves they can't even put a plan together. We Democrats do have a plan.
And as for that farm aid package, it includes $11 billion in one-time payments. The remaining $1 billion will go to other crops not covered by the program.
Well, joining us now with a deeper dive on the president's economic push is Victoria Churchill. She's a spokesperson for Young Voices and a reporter with the Daily Mail.
Victoria, welcome. Always good to see you. So the president, he's criticized the word affordability and calls it a Democratic scam. But the fact that he's talking about it seems to show that he does understand it's something a lot of people are talking about and feeling. What's your read, Victoria, on how Americans are feeling about this issue?
Well, I think the president is right to focus on this, and I think that he was incorrect. I think it was a rare messaging misstep from him. I believe it was last week or maybe the week before with Thanksgiving, where he said that it was all a Democrat scam, because he has also in the past called himself the affordability president, and so I don't think that you can kind of have both sides of the coin, saying that this is both a false narrative, but also doing your best to message on it. I do think that the president has made great strides with affordability. I think he was talking to Politico in an interview that I believe just dropped earlier today, where of course he was talking about things like gas prices. I'm somebody that's traveled all across the country, particularly covering campaigns, particularly in Pennsylvania, where the president is going to be later tonight. And, I know that this is something that folks have been concerned about. Last year's election, which I covered quite extensively in swing states, it was all about putting food on the table. It was all about economic prosperity, and it was all about making sure that Americans can succeed economically. And so, I think the president knows that, and I think that's why he's continuing to message on this.
You talked about the messaging with it being a misstep. In some ways, it seems muddled from going to a con job to a scam to now doing this rally. Do you believe the president can turn his numbers around with rallies like this one tonight, where he's touting the strength of the economy?
I think both Democrats and Republicans know that Trump is at his best when he is in campaign mode. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles was on a podcast that I saw yesterday. I'm not quite sure if it was filmed earlier in the week or not, but I believe it was with Moms for America. And, she was talking about how she sees her role in the White House as actually, in terms of the campaign, talking about putting the president on the ballot, which historically the president, of course, is not on the ballot during the midterms. And, this was kind of a debate in last week's election, of course, with Tennessee. Democrats tried their best to put Trump on the ballot in a negative way. And the Republican, in his speech where he was accepting his win, Matt Van Epps, who is now the new representative for Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, he said, this is how we win. We have to run with Donald Trump because, in his case and in others that are going to be running in the midterms, these people will still be serving to, at least as Republicans, try and enact a Trump agenda. The White House is going to be doing everything in the midterms to make sure that Trump is not a lame duck president after the midterms, as typically happens with administrations. And, I think the president's journey, particularly to Pennsylvania, which is the swing state of all swing states, we're going to be talking, of course, throughout all of next year about what states the House majority that's currently quite razor thin, what states that House majority is going to run through. And Pennsylvania is definitely on the short list. They had 3 seats that were very closely watched last year during the 2024 elections, and I think it will be that number, if not more, during next year's midterms in 2026.
Yeah, and I think in that same interview you mentioned, Susie Wiles had said that Donald Trump would be out campaigning in the midterms like it was 2024. Victoria, meanwhile, an upcoming Senate vote on extending Obamacare subsidies is expected to fail because it doesn't include the Republican reforms. How important, Victoria, will it be for Congress to get something done on health care, particularly as we look at the midterms?
I think this is something that a lot of Americans are watching. Of course, during the Democrat shutdown that lasted, historic lengths, Democrats were talking particularly about the need to reform the Affordable Care Act. They did not end up getting anything healthcare-wise in the rerun of the Affordable Care Act. And so that was kind of the compromise that Republicans came to, was guaranteeing Democrats a vote on the package that they want. Now, it is important to note that Senate Health, which is the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, Senator from Louisiana, Bill Cassidy, he has introduced his own legislation. He introduced it yesterday, the bill text. Of course, it's quite complicated, but it has elements, at least from what I've seen, of a more kind of free market plan. And that's also important to note because that is something that folks potentially like a Senator Rand Paul could agree to. President Trump shared a text with Senator Rand Paul last week where, Paul was like, I know we've kind of had some issues, but here's my idea on healthcare, kind of what do you think? And, the president kind of took that and ran with that and saying, if I can make deals with Rand Paul, who tends to, attack me at times, even though he's a member of my own party, I can probably make deals with anyone. So it'll be interesting to see what the president comes up with. I know Senator Cassidy has had some proposals that the White House and the rest of the administration seem keen on. But of course, it all comes back to, kind of backroom deals that are going to be being made here on Capitol Hill as to what actually gets a vote.
All right, Victoria Churchill of Young Voices, thank you so much for your time and your insights tonight. We know you're awfully busy covering Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you so much.
Turning overseas to the Middle East, where phase 1 of the Gaza ceasefire is nearly final. Now, Hamas is throwing a roadblock in the path forward, backing away from the pledge to give up weapons.
President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are set to meet later this month to plan how to disarm Hamas and demilitarize Gaza. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has the story.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida on December 29th.
They will discuss the future steps and phases and the international stabilization force of the ceasefire plan.
Netanyahu says phase 1 of the ceasefire agreement is nearly complete, with one more hostage body, Ron Gavili, still in Gaza. Hamas and the Red Cross are actively searching for him.
And now we have a second phase, no less daunting, and that is to achieve the disarmament of Hamas and the demilitarization of Gaza.
In a press conference with Germany's chancellor, Netanyahu said the discussions should go beyond the second phase.
There's a third phase, and that is to de-radicalize Gaza, something that also people believed was impossible. But it was done in Germany. It was done in Japan. It's done in the Gulf states. It can be done in Gaza too. But of course, Hamas has to be dismantled.
Despite agreeing to the ceasefire, Hamas officials are balking at giving up their arms. Political leader Khaled Mashal says the weapons are part of the resistance project and the right of our people to defend themselves. Another official, Khalil al-Haya, says Hamas won't disarm until there's a sovereign Palestinian state and won't accept an international force within Gaza, only one to monitor the borders, a key component of Trump's plan. In eastern Jerusalem, Israel raided the offices of UNRWA, the UN agency responsible for Palestinian refugees, saying the move was a debt collection procedure for unpaid property taxes. Israeli government spokeswoman Shosh Bedrosian accuses UNRWA of enormous failures and said it should be dismantled.
UNRWA continues to claim there's also not enough humanitarian aid going inside of the Gaza Strip. If you look at the facts, there are hundreds of trucks entering Gaza on a daily basis. There are thousands of trucks entering Gaza on a weekly basis. The aid is entering Gaza freely and without the help from UN agencies that terrorists have embedded themselves into.
In Lebanon overnight, Israel struck Hezbollah targets, including a training and qualification compound the IDF says is for planning and executing attacks against Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Julie. Coming up, pregnancy centers on trial. The newest Supreme Court battle for the pro-life movement. That's next on Faith Nation. Well, welcome back. The Supreme Court is tackling a case that could upend the future of campaign funding. The 2022 suit brought by Republican campaign committees, including then Senate candidate J.D. Vance, challenges long-standing limits on how much coordinated spending can take place between parties and the candidates.
Yeah, lawyers for the GOP say those restrictions are a First Amendment violation. Opponents say the limits help prevent cases of quid pro quo or pay to play and corruption. The current spending levels vary depending on the race and the location of the election and range from $63,000 to more than $3 million. Experts say a ruling in favor of the GOP would be the biggest change in campaign finance since the 2010 Citizens United case opened the door for unlimited spending from unions and major corporations.
Well, in another major case, the High Court appears to be leaning in favor of pro-life pregnancy centers in New Jersey.
Yeah, the justices heard arguments in the case pitting Christian-based first-choice women's resource centers against the state attorney general. Lori Johnson has more on that.
2 years ago, New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin subpoenaed first-choice pregnancy centers, demanding their donors' identities and contact information. First Choice refused, maintaining the information should be kept private. The Attorney General's office argued their request was part of an investigation into whether First Choice tricked donors into thinking they were contributing to an abortion provider.
Our entire purpose in asking for the category of donor information that we asked about was to evaluate whether any donors themselves might have been deceived by the representations on the donation pages maintained by First Choice.
I gather that you think the website might have made them think that this was an entity that provided abortion care as opposed to a pro-life entity. So that was the concern?
Yeah, that's right, Your Honor.
However, First Choice insists their website clearly presents a pro-life stance.
It is not in the least misleading. It pictures smiling faces of babies and their families, that there's no question that it belongs to something like Planned Parenthood.
First Choice attorney Aaron Hawley believes the true reason behind this subpoena involves a widespread attack on the pro-life movement.
This is the context of a hostile attorney general who has issued a consumer alert urged New Jerseyans to beware of pregnancy centers and assembled a strike force against them.
Were there complaints against you that stimulated the subpoena?
No, Your Honor. The Attorney General has never identified a single complaint.
Furthermore, First Choice says disclosing donor information violates their freedom of speech and would scare them away.
Some donors gave as little as $10. Those folks are going to be worried about a state attorney general, the highest law enforcement officer in the country, demanding their names, phone numbers, addresses, places of employment so that he can contact them.
Some justices agreed.
You know, this is just kind of obvious that there's some kind of objective chill from a subpoena on speech.
I mean, they're saying if we'd known that this was going to happen, we wouldn't have given. Perforce, if it's going to be disclosed, we won't give. I mean, doesn't that just follow night from day?
Even the ACLU filed a brief calling the Attorney General's move suppression by subpoena and censorship by intimidation. The High Court is expected to issue its ruling in June. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
It's been called the first Christian nation. How Armenia ended up at the center of a persecution controversy. Welcome back. Armenia has long prided itself on being the world's first Christian nation. But now, a prominent media influencer has accused the government there of cracking down on Christianity.
Well, a group of Americans recently traveled to the country for the first ever national prayer breakfast. And as Chuck Holton reports, they found a very different story.
Armenia's inaugural national prayer breakfast brought together government and faith leaders to focus on the future of this fragile nation. Despite loud claims that Christianity is under attack here, churches are open, worship is free, and spiritual leaders are seated alongside top officials. But that's not the message Americans are hearing from pundits like Tucker Carlson.
This prime minister, who's clearly authoritarian, by definition, is against the church. So the idea is to break the back of Orthodox Christianity of traditional Christianity in Armenia, and to use the police to do it.
Armenian experts say Carlson's assertion leaves out critical context. They dispute his accusation that recent arrests of 2 clergymen had anything to do with practicing their faith.
2 of them especially have been engaged in political activism, let me put it that way. One of them has urged the military to stage a coup. The other one has organized an opposition movement. Armenia's attempt to somehow become more sovereign, to pursue its own diplomacy, somehow made Russia to engage more actively into the external affairs of Armenia.
These political clashes come as Armenia tries to break free from decades of Russian influence. Some American Christian leaders who met with Armenia's prime minister say the war on Christianity claims by Tucker Carlson and others are not just wrong. They serve Russia's interests.
When I was invited to come, I got articles from friends saying, hey, were you not aware this prime minister in Armenia is at war with Christianity? And I was looking into it, and then I learned from people I trusted he was not at war with Christianity. So I came on, and having spent a couple of days with him and visited with him privately, personally, this is not a man who is at war with Christianity. This is a man who is wanting to do what he is supposed to in accordance with Christian principles and following biblical principles. And I am so impressed with him. But when you try to do what he's doing, this is the kind of attacks you come under, and sometimes it comes from religious people.
While the political rhetoric grabs international headlines, many here see Armenia's most dangerous threat coming from its own demographic collapse. Armenia faces pressures on multiple fronts. The threats from Azerbaijan and Turkey are very real, but the bigger danger might actually be inside the country. Armenia's birth rate has collapsed, and if nothing changes, this nation could easily lose a share of its population over the next century and almost cease to exist. Many leaders here are saying they're pointing directly to abortion and the declining family formation as major factors in this demographic decline. And in their view, this crisis is a bigger long-term threat than anything that's happening across the border.
Unfortunately, abortion in Armenia is one of those subjects that has not been publicly spoken about until this inaugural prayer breakfast. From 1955 until 2024, 1,800,000 abortions have taken place in that time. I mean, they've murdered their own more than the Turks and the Azeris, and it is a greater threat.
With enemies on its borders and disinformation targeting its unity, Armenia's greatest challenge may be rebuilding a culture of life and family. Leaders here say that without it, the world's first Christian nation could face a future far more dangerous than any military threat. From Armenia, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Thank you, Chuck. When Faith Nation returns, a celebration of hope as a Christmas tradition returns to the Holy Land. Jenna, are you ready for Christmas?
So ready. I
Are
have
you?
an Advent. I'm counting down. Oh, yeah. The Christmas music is on.
You did the second lighting of the candle.
Yeah.
All right, well, Christmas is upon us and a tradition is returning to the Holy Land.
Yeah, after a 2-year pause in festivities, the Christmas tree outside the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem is shining bright once again. Onlookers gathered in Manger Square to see the lights flicker on. Celebrations, came to a halt in recent years as Israel's war with Gaza intensified. Tourism also took a big hit, causing poverty to skyrocket. City officials say after years of conflict and economic challenges, the tree's return represents something more. And the location is special to Christian minorities in Israel and Gaza and believed to be the site of Jesus' birth. So very special.
Sounds like a very special celebration. Thanks for joining us.